Okay, our next guest is Dr. Michael Greger. Dr. Greger has lectured at the Conference on World Affairs, the National Institutes of Health, and the International Bird Flu Summit, among countless other symposiums and institutions. Michael Greger has appeared on shows such as The Colbert Report and The Dr. Oz Show, and was invited as an expert witness in defense of Oprah Winfrey at the infamous Meat defamation trial. Dr. Greger has searched the world's most scholarly literature on clinical nutrition and developed a brand new talk of the latest in cutting-edge research, focusing on studies published just over the last year in peer-reviewed scientific nutrition journals. Dr. Greger offers practical advice on how best to feed ourselves and our families to prevent, treat, and even reverse chronic disease in an interactive format. Dr. Greger's nutrition work can be found at nutritionfacts.org. I want to just say a few things. I had a couple of summers gone to Vegetarian Summerfest, and I had never heard of Dr. Greger, and I saw him there, and I was incredibly impressed. I've been following this type of information for a number of years, but he offered exactly what I like most, someone who took the facts from the science, interpreted it correctly, and in an unbiased way gave it to us. And I saw him a couple of times at Vegetarian Summerfest, which they have each summer at University of Pittsburgh. But what's also interesting is that when I read the introduction of Dr. Greger and other people, it really, on one hand, is very impressive what his background is, but it's a little bit sometimes misleading because a lot of people have great credentials. A lot of people are doctors, are researchers, are authors, are writers, went to wonderful colleges, and that alone is not what actually means that you're getting accurate, unbiased information. Dr. Michael Greger, I have watched what he does. He has nutritionfacts.org, which is this fantastic website, but they don't sell anything. He doesn't really sell or have lots of books, and he doesn't really have anything he's promoting. I believe his true intention is to do what is in the highest good of people and the planet and the animals. And as I continue on my journey to learn more, I have to be very careful in who I get my information from. And I have to be very discerning to make sure the person is unbiased and their real intention is to look after us. And I could say from my heart that I really do believe that of all the people out there, that Dr. Michael Greger's intention, as much as anyone I know, is to be on your side. He is not looking to promote any certain industry. He doesn't have any agenda. His agenda is to get you what is the most accurate information, even if it's not what the mainstream is saying. So without further ado, I'm very happy to present Dr. Michael Greger.
Good afternoon. For those of you unfamiliar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world, so you don't have to. Every year my talks are brand new because every year the science is brand new. I then compile all the most interesting, most groundbreaking, most practical findings and new videos and articles I upload every day to my website, nutritionfacts.org, as was mentioned. Everything on the website is free. There's no ads, no corporate sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything. Just put it up as a public service. New video, the latest in nutritional science every day. For those of you who've seen my talks in the past, and I've been to New York a number of times, you know I've addressed some of the most pressing dietary issues of our time. Like, what's the best variety of apple to eat? Or what's the most nutritious nut? Or the best bean? Or the best berry? Or the best bowel movement? I don't know if you remember this from who's number one and number two? Well, it wasn't the New Yorkers. Actually, the most constipated population ever studied in the medical literature. Seriously, outputting a mere 3 ounces a day. If you all just eat a big apple once in a while. But I thought this year I'd lighten it up and asks, what's the best way to prevent death? Every year, the CDC lists the top 15 causes of death in the United States. I said, well, let's just go through the list. 1 through 15. Talk about the role diet may play in preventing, treating, and even reversing our top 15 killers. Killer number 1 is heart disease. In the International Journal of Epidemiology recently, they reprinted this landmark article from the 1950s that started out with a shocking statement. The statement was, in the African population of Uganda, coronary heart disease is almost non-existent. Our number one killer of men and women in this country, number one killer almost non-existent? What were they eating? Oh, they were eating lots of vegetables, green leafy vegetables taken by all, and the protein in their diet was almost exclusively from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol to prove it. Actually very similar to what you see in kind of modern day plant eaters. But look, maybe they were just dying early from other diseases, didn't live long enough to get heart disease. Well, let's see. Here's age-matched heart attack rates, Uganda versus St. Louis. All right, out of 632 autopsies in Uganda, 1 myocardial infarction. All right. Out of 632 Missourians, same age and gender distribution, there were 136 myocardial infarctions. Right? More than 100 times the rate of our number one killer. In fact, they were so blown away, they went and did another 1,000, and still, out of 1,427 patients, just the one small healed infarct, meaning it wasn't even the cause of death. Less than 1 in 1,000, whereas here in the U.S., heart disease is an epidemic. Here's a list of diseases commonly found here and in populations that eat and live like the U.S., but are rare or even non-existent in populations that eat diets centered around whole plant foods. These are among our most common diseases, like obesity, hiatal hernia, one of the most common problems of the stomach, varicose veins and hemorrhoids, most common venous or diseases of veins. Number 2 cancer killer, colon cancer. Diverticular disease, number 1 disease of the intestine. Appendicitis, number 1 cause of emergency abdominal surgery. Gallbladder disease, number 1 cause of non-emergency abdominal surgery, as well as ischemic heart disease, our most common cause of death. Here, but a rarity among plant-based populations. Heart disease, therefore, is a choice. It's like cavities. If you look at the teeth of people who lived over 10,000 years before the invention of the toothbrush, pretty much no cavities. Didn't brush a day in their lives, no Listerine, no water pick, yet no cavities. Why? Because candy bars hadn't been invented yet, right? Simple, right? Oh, why did George Washington? Well, you know, there are few people, go back in history, that have diseases of royalty, right? When you think of gout, heart disease, obesity, who got those diseases? It was the people, the kings and queens that ate like, but now, modern day America, we can eat like, you know, kings for breakfast, queens for lunch, right? But among populations that weren't eating like royalty, weren't eating these rich diets, they didn't have these kinds of problems. So wait a second. Why do people continue to get cavities when we know they're preventable through dietary changes? Well, because, the pleasure people derive from dessert, outweighs the cost and discomfort of the dentist chair. And look, that's fine, right? Look, as long as people understand the consequences of their actions, right? As a physician, what more can I do? If you decide, right, you're an adult, decide the benefits outweigh the risk for you and your family, then go for it. I certainly enjoy the occasional indulgence. I've got a good dental plan, all right? But what if instead of the plaque on our teeth, we're talking about the plaque building up inside of our arteries? Another disease that can be prevented through diet. Then what are the consequences for us and our families, right? Now we're not talking about scraping tartar anymore. Now we're talking life and death. The most likely reason all of our loved ones will die is heart disease, right? It's still up to each of us to make up our own minds as to what to eat and how to live, but we should make these choices consciously, right? Educating ourselves about the predictable consequences of our actions. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, begins in childhood. By age 10, the arteries of nearly all kids have fatty streaks, the first stage of the disease. And then these plaques start forming in their 20s, get worse in their 30s, and then can start killing us off. In our heart, it's a heart attack. In our brain, the same disease as a stroke. In our limbs, it can mean gangrene. In our aorta, an aneurysm. Right? If there is anyone here today over the age of 10, then the question isn't whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease. It's whether or not we want to eat healthy to reverse the heart disease that we already have. Ornish and Esselstyn proved you can reverse heart disease, not just prevent it, not just stop it in its tracks, but reverse heart disease, open up arteries without drugs, without surgery, just with a healthy plant-based diet. But look, we don't want to wait for our first heart attack to start reversing our arteries and reversing our heart disease, unclogging our arteries. And that's because for half of the people that die from heart disease, they die from what's called sudden cardiac death, meaning your first symptom is your last. It's defined as people dying within 60 minutes of their first symptom of heart disease. They feel a little chest pain, 60 minutes, they're maybe with their family, 60 minutes later, they're gone from this earth. That's half the people that die from heart disease. So they don't get a chance. Even if they, if they tell the paramedics to not, make the detour to the fast food restaurant on the way there, it's just too late. That's why we can't wait for our first symptoms. We can start reversing our heart disease right now. We can start reversing the heart disease in our kids tonight. Cancer is killer number 2. The Pritikin Research Foundation did a really elegant series of experiments, but let me just throw some quick stats. This is the largest study ever to look at diet and cancer, looking at about 500,000 people. Found the incidence of all cancers combined lower among those eating vegetarian compared to those eating meat. And the worst, the most striking finding was how low the risk was for some of these fastest growing cancers like lymphomas and leukemias, these liquid cancers. And the worst meat out of all the ones, of all the animal products they looked at was actually poultry consumption. They got about 2 to 3 times the odds, so this is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, follicular leukemia, these others, lymphomas, leukemias, 2 to 3 times the risk for just every 50 grams of poultry consumption. That's like a quarter of a chicken breast every day. May triple our risk of these cancers. In fact, the relationship between meat and cancer is such that in the journal Meat Science, they asked, should we become vegetarians or can we make meat safer? This is what they're coming up with, all these additives to add to the meat to, for example, suppress the toxic effects of the heme iron, the blood-based iron in meat. Now, they're still kind of under study, but could provide what they call an acceptable way to prevent cancer, because reducing meat consumption completely out of the question, obviously. Their concern is that should the National Cancer Institute recommendations to reduce meat consumption be adhered to, yeah, sure, cancer incidence may be reduced, but farmers in the meat industry would suffer important economical problems. For those of us more worried about the suffering caused by this industry rather than the suffering of the industry, what happens if you put cancer on a plant-based diet? And this is where the Pritikin Research Foundation came in, did these really elegant series of experiments, simple experiments. You take people, put them on different diets, you draw their blood, you drip their blood on human cancer cells growing in a petri dish, and you see just whose blood is better at suppressing cancer growth. So they were part of the team that worked with Dr. Dean Ornish to take men with prostate cancer, put them on a plant-based diet for a year, and this is what they found. They found that the blood of even those eating the standard American diet suppressed cancer growth. I mean, if it didn't, most of us would be dead right now. It's just that those men who ate a plant-based diet for a year, their blood suppressed cancer growth about 7 times better. The blood circulating through the bodies of these men gained the power to significantly slow down cancer cell growth. Now, but this was for men and prostate cancer. For women, number one cancer killer among young women is breast cancer. They wanted to repeat the study using women and breast cancer cells, but look, they didn't want to wait a whole year to get the results. And so they said, let's see what a plant-based diet can do within 2 weeks against 3 lines of human breast cancer. So this is the before picture, cancer cell growth powering weight 100%, and then this is after just 2 weeks eating healthy. This is a representative slide, kind of under the microscope. Basically, they lay down a carpet of human breast cancer. They drip on the blood of women eating the standard American diet, and then they do the same. Then they put them on a healthy diet for 2 weeks, and then they do it again. And so they act as their own controls, before and after. So this is women eating the standard American diet. You can see, even if you're eating a pretty poor diet, you can kind of break up some of the cancer. But 2 weeks eating healthy in their blood can do this, right? Their body's just cleaned up. It's like they're a whole new person inside. Now, slowing cancer growth is nice, but getting rid of it is even better. This is what's called tunnel imaging, which measures DNA fragmentation or cell death, where dying cells light up as little white spots. As you can see, again, even if you're eating a crappy diet, you can kill off a few cancer cells, but you take these same women just 2 weeks later eating healthy, and their bodies can do this. Which raises the question, what kind of blood do we want, right? Do we want blood that just kind of, rolls over when new cancer cells pop up? Or do we want a bloodstream circulating to every nook and cranny in our body with the power to slow down and stop it? Now this is what's, again, measuring programmed cell death before and after. Now, but this was before and after a plant-based diet and exercise. They had these women going out walking 30 minutes a day. You say, well, wait a second. If you do 2 things, diet and exercise, how do you know diet had anything to do with it? So they decided to find out. So this is what we saw before the diet and exercise group. This is measuring programmed cell death, cancer cell clearance, and as you can see, now this group, healthy diet, plant-based diet, and daily exercise, just like walking, moderate exercise, for 14 years on average. All right, and you can see the cancer cell clearance they got. Compare that to your average standard American diet person. Their cancer cell clearance is essentially non-existent. All right. Okay, but we've already seen that. This is the interesting group in the middle. So this group, 14 years of the standard American diet, but 14 years of daily, strenuous, hour-long exercise like calisthenics, literally an hour a day in the gym, 7 days a week for 14 years. So that's thousands of hours in the gym. How did they do? You see a little burger in their hand. All right. They wanted to know, if you exercise long enough, if you exercise hard enough, can you rival some strolling plant eaters? Let's see what happened. Exercise worked, no question. But nothing appears to kind of kick more cancer butt than a plant-based diet. Here's that same tunnel imaging we saw before. Even if you're a couch potato eating fried potatoes, you're not totally defenseless. You can kill off a few cancer cells. You exercise for thousands of hours, and you can kill off cancer cells left and right, but nothing appears more powerful than eating a plant-based diet. The question is why? And actually, normally I kind of skip this section, but I know this. I thought this crowd could take a little extra science, and the question, because it's shocking. How can, within 2 weeks, it's like you're an entirely different person. How could you so dramatically improve your cancer defenses in such a short time? Well, we actually found out recently. They finally figured out the underlying mechanism for these anti-cancer effects. And these experiments actually go back over a decade. And the reason, even though they're really phenomenal work, the reason I didn't cover it, the reason there weren't videos on the website, is because there wasn't a mechanism. I was not satisfied. I wanted to know why. And they finally figured it out. And it involves, it's a fascinating detective story, and I have lots of videos that talk about how they figured it out, but I'll just kind of skip to the chase. But it has to do with little people and big people, and has to do with big dogs and little dogs. And marshmallows, Tinker Toys, and cannibalism, vegan bodybuilders, on and it's a great, I encourage people to check it out, but jump to the chase, IGF-1. You just heard the last speaker talk about insulin-like growth factor 1, which is this cancer-promoting growth hormone involved, as you heard, in every stage of cancer cell initiation, promotion, spread, and growth. And you go on a healthy plant-based diet and exercise, and you drop, within 2 weeks, your IGF-1 levels. And you do it for years, it is that 14-year group, you drop your levels even better. So the benefits continue to accrue the longer you do it. And your levels of IGF-1 binding protein go up. IGF-1 binding protein is like your body's emergency brake. It's your body's way to prevent uncontrolled growth in the body within just 2 weeks, you can lower your IGF-1 levels. But what about all the IGF-1 you had, IGF-1 production you can lower within 2 weeks? What about all the IGF-1 you have circulating from the bacon and eggs you had 3 weeks ago? Well, your liver releases this snatch squad of binding proteins to pull excess IGF-1 out of your system. Within just 2 weeks, your binding capacity goes up, and you keep up with a healthy diet for years, your binding capacity goes up even further. And this is the experiment that really nailed IGF-1 as the villain. This is what we saw before. You go on a healthy diet, cancer cell growth drops like a rock, cancer cell death shoots up, which is what we want. Here's the critical group here. What they did is they added back to the cancer cells just the amount of IGF-1 banished from their system, added back to the cancer just the amount that was banished by eating healthy, and what happens? You eliminate the diet and exercise effect. It's as if you never started eating healthy at all. And so this is how we know that by eating, in this case it's actually the animal protein, eating animal protein, we boost our liver's production of IGF-1, and that boosts cancer growth. But we can drop that, again, within just weeks. But raises the question, how low does one have to go? And I talk about a number of follow-up studies that have looked at vegetarians versus vegans versus meat eaters, and it turns out it is the animal protein that's boosting IGF-1, so it doesn't matter, as you heard last, whether it's dairy protein, egg protein, meat protein. that vegetarians did not have significantly lower IGF-1 levels than meat eaters. Only the vegans, only those kind of moving towards wholly plant-based diets were able to significantly lower their IGF-1 levels. But let me move on. We've got 13 leading causes of death to go. The top 3 causes of death used to be heart disease, cancer, stroke. Oh, that's so 2011. Now it's heart disease, cancer, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, respiratory diseases like emphysema. Thankfully, they can be prevented with prevented with a plant-based diet, maybe even treated with a plant-based diet. This is really exciting. With emphysema, we used to think you get worse, then you die. We used to think that with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. You get diabetes, you get worse, you lose your kidneys, you lose your eyesight, you lose your toes, and then you die. Okay. But now we know no. Not only can type 2 diabetes be prevented, we can treat it, reverse it, cure it. But for the first time, this study showed that you can actually show an improvement in lung function. What was this miracle intervention? It was adding a few servings of fruits and vegetables to their daily diet. That's all. Actually got an improvement. They actually had an improvement in lung function. Whether it's the anti-inflammatory effects, the antioxidant effects, we don't know. But that, from a clinical standpoint, very exciting work. But wait a second. If adding plants to our diet can improve lung function, wouldn't be easier, the tobacco industry figured, to just add fruits to cigarettes. And indeed, the addition of acai berries to cigarettes evidently has a protective effect against emphysema in smoking mice. Who would have thunk it, right? Next, they're going to start, adding berries to meat. I couldn't make this stuff up. Here it is. Adding fruit extracts to burger patties was not without its glitches. The blackberries dyed the burgers with this distinct kind of purplish color that kind of turned people off. Though you can evidently improve the tenderness of lamb carcasses if you infuse them before rigor mortis sets in with kiwi fruit juice. You can even improve the nutritional profile of frankfurters by adding powdered grape seeds, though there were concerns that some of the grapeseed particles were visible in the final product. If there's one thing we know about hot dog eaters, it's that they're picky about what's in their food. Pig anus? Okay. But grapeseed? Ew! Stroke comes in at number 4. Preventing strokes is all about eating potassium-rich foods. Potassium, from the words potash, take any plant, put it in a pot, reduce it to ash, add some water, boil it off, left with a white residue, which is known as potash. That's how they got the name potassium. And the only reason I say that is because that's just, it shows you where potassium is found, predominantly in the plant kingdom. Who can tell me one food particularly high in potassium? There we go, bananas, right? Yeah, I don't know if Chiquita just had a great PR team or something. I don't know why that's like the one thing everybody knows about nutrition. Turns out bananas don't even make the top 50 sources of bananas. Coming in at number 86, right behind fast food vanilla milkshakes. It goes faster than bananas. So that's a good question. So where are our top sources? So 1 and 2 are tomato and orange concentrates. That's not really fair. In terms of whole foods, though, it's greens, beans, and dates. Super healthy foods we should try to fit into our daily diet. Next on the list, in fact, look, and again, bananas down 86, and look at the next leading cause of death. Actually, could be dangerous. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Three years ago, Alzheimer's disease was our 8th leading cause of death. 2 years ago, it was our 7th leading cause of death, right? And now, number 6, 4 million Americans now stricken with Alzheimer's disease. Now, we have known for decades that those eating meat, red meat, white meat, doesn't matter, have between 2 and 3 times the risk of becoming demented. And the longer one goes without eating meat, the lower one's risk falls. But again, we've known about this for decades. What's new, the exciting new research, is on treating Alzheimer's with natural plant-based remedies like saffron, which beat out placebo and works just as well as the leading drug, Aricept, prescribed for Alzheimer's, of course, without the side effects. I also have videos coming out on the role of curcumin, which is the yellow pigment in the spice turmeric, which you can buy anywhere, super cheap. But so certainly you know anybody with this dreaded disease, go over and make them some paella. And of course, all those videos are up on the site if you're interested. Diabetes, 7th leading killer. Thankfully, type 2 diabetes can be prevented with a plant-based diet, can be treated, cured, reversed in many cases with a plant-based diet. So here's the latest, the Ventus 2 study. This is the largest study on plant-based eating in North America to date. So compared to non-vegetarians, those that just eat fish may or may not have slightly lower rates of diabetes. Those that cut out all meat certainly do. And those eating totally plant-based diets have much lower rates. And critically, this is after adjusting for BMI. After, you say, well, of course vegans have low rates of diabetes. They're so skinny on average. But no. Even at the same weight, vegans have just a fraction of the diabetes. But it does kind of raise the question, why are vegans, on average, so skinny? So if you look at BMI, body mass index, so anything over 25 is considered overweight, anything over 30 is obese. And we used to call anything under 25 normal weight. It's no longer normal. So now we just call it ideal weight. And this is why it's not normal. Meat eaters are up at 28.6. Flexitarians, people that just eat meat kind of on a weekly basis, Sunday roast, something like that, not on a daily basis, they're doing better. But look, even vegetarians in the United States are on average overweight. It's based on tens of thousands. So really, so only those eating kind of more towards the extreme of plant-based eating, centering their diets around whole plant foods, were really the only dietary group that we have that actually is, on average, ideal weight. And you say, well, why? It turns out they eat some fewer calories, but not that many fewer. So that's about a 35-pound difference. So that's the average amount of weight loss for people moving from standard American diet to a vegan diet. It comes out about 35 pounds. That's what the clinical studies show. And so, yeah, they eat slightly fewer calories. Plant foods have a lot of water and fiber, and you feel fuller, but not 35 pounds. And so a number of theories, I've talked about them over the years. Maybe it's because vegetarians have more of this fat-burning enzyme in our mitochondria, little power plants in our cells, called carnitine palmitoyl transferase, upregulated in vegetarians for some reason. We're not exactly sure why. It's possible we have different types of gut bacteria. In fact, recently in the New England Journal, a really interesting study how very quickly, kind of within days, you can change the entire ecosystem, taking vegans, putting them on adding meat to their diets. And this actually may affect how we extract energy from our diets. It may be these so-called obesogens, these endocrine-disrupting chemical pollutants that build up in the meat supply, may be playing a role. There's even a poultry virus in chicken that may be causing a weight gain. But here's the latest. This is largest study ever to look at this question. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people. Followed for years, and their objective was, what was the association between meat consumption and weight gain? And this is what they found. Meat consumption associated with weight gain in basically every group, and suggesting, of course, a decrease in meat consumption to improve weight management. This was after controlling for smoking and exercise, but here's the kicker. This is after controlling for calories. So you have two people eating the same number of calories. The person eating more meat will gain more weight. They even determined how much more. So basically, you ate 250 grams of meat a day, kind of like a steak a day, would lead to an annual weight gain 422 grams higher than the weight gain experienced if you had the exact same number of calories in your diet, but you just were eating less meat. And after a few years, you can put a couple pounds on just because of that effect. Steak was nothing. Strongest relation maybe with poultry intake. So for example, if you eat a quarter pounder every day, this is how much weight you'd add on. In addition to the calories actually found in that quarter pounder. Processed meat is worse. If you had a ham sandwich, the exact same number of calories as the burger, you'd actually gain more weight. But here's chicken. This is half a chicken breast a day. And again, this is above and beyond the calories actually found in that chicken. And so, of course, they conclude, indicate meat intake associated with weight gain. This is after adjusting for calories, therefore in favor of the public health recommendation to decrease meat consumption for health improvement. What did the National Cattlemen's Beef Association have to say about that study? It was, after all, the largest ever done. Funny story, don't have time to get into it, but check it out if you're interested. And then I talk about PCRM's work, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, taking this, putting it in a workplace setting. What happens if we actually change cafeterias? And it's very exciting if people are interested in that kind of work as well. Next on the list, kidney failure. Kidney failure, a plant-based diet can help prevent kidney failure, can actually be used to treat kidney failure. You say, why? Because kidneys are highly vascular organs. That's why they look so red when you cut them open. And so if if the standard American diet is so toxic to arteries in our heart, brain, and pelvis, leading to heart attacks, strokes, and sexual dysfunction, respectively, what might they be doing to our poor kidneys? Well, long story short, Harvard researchers found 3 dietary risk factors, and only 3, for worsening kidney function. What they were doing is measuring something called proteinuria, loss of protein in the urine. You're not supposed to be losing protein in the urine. Your whole point of your kidneys is to hold on to the good stuff. When you do start losing protein, it shows your kidneys are starting to fail. What are the 3 dietary risk factors? Number 1, animal protein. Number 2, animal fat. Number 3, cholesterol. Right? So it wasn't the amount of protein. It wasn't the amount of fat, specifically the animal protein, specifically the animal fat and cholesterol, all 3 of which is only found in one place, and that is in animal products. If you do a cross-sectional study, snapshot in time, vegans have better kidney function, and you can actually take people with kidney failure and treat them with a pure vegetarian diet and see dramatic differences within just 1 week, which as a physician I'm most excited about. Next on the list, we are deep right now in flu season, New York and everywhere else in the country. You say, well, wait a second, what possible role could diet play with dying from the flu or a lower respiratory tract infection like pneumonia? Obviously, you haven't heard about the immunostimulatory effects of kale. Is there anything kale cannot do? So there's a whole long list. So I have lots of articles talking about the role that blueberries and mushrooms and all sorts of things can play in boosting our immune system. In this study, they took older men and women and all they didn't take meat out of the diet, nothing, just added a few servings of fruits and vegetables to their daily diet. Right before they were getting their Pneumovax vaccination, their pneumonia vaccination, this is what they had. This is what they found. They found a significant boost in protective antibody response in those eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day compared to those eating 2. Significantly boost immune response. What was this miracle thing that it just added a few servings of fruits and vegetables? That's how powerful plants can be. Next on the list, okay, now what role could a diet play in suicide? Well, 2 years ago, I profiled this important study, cross-sectional study, found that those eating plant-based diets had significantly improved mood, less depression, less anxiety, less stress. But this is a cross-sectional study, meaning a snapshot in time, so you can't prove cause and effect. Maybe people who are mentally healthy go on to eat healthy and not the other way around. What you need is the gold standard in nutritional science, which is an interventional study. You take people, you change their diet, see what happens, and that's what this group of researchers did. They took people, men and women, in the standard American diet, took out meat, took out fish, took out poultry, actually took out eggs as well, because they thought it was the arachidonic acid, this pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acid found predominantly in chicken and eggs in our diets. They thought that was causing what's called neuroinflammation, brain inflammation, which was impairing their mental functioning. So they removed that and saw significant improvement in mood within just 2 weeks. It can take drugs like Prozac months to take an effect. Significant improvement in mood after just 2 weeks. And of course, the only side effects are good ones. What about the role of diet and septicemia, or invasive bloodborne infections? Well, certainly you can get something like Salmonella, E. coli burrow through the intestinal wall into your bloodstream, or in women actually crawl up into their urethra. We've known that urinary tract infections in women, the bacteria that cause bladder infections actually comes from the fecal flora, which just kind of creeps up into the bladder. But we didn't know where this reservoir of bladder-infecting bacteria was coming from until now. Chicken, that's where this reservoir, these special types of E. coli that cause bladder infections come from. We now have DNA fingerprinting proof of this direct link between chickens colonizing the guts of women, which then later leads to literally millions of infections, bladder infections, which can turn serious and actually become systemic and life-threatening. Wait a second. You can't sell unsafe cars. You can't sell unsafe toys. How is it even legal to sell unsafe meat? Well, they do it by blaming the consumer. Quoting one USDA poultry microbiologist, look, raw meats are not idiot-proof, right? They can be mishandled, and when they are, it's like handling a hand grenade. You pull the pin, someone's going to get hurt. Now, while some may question the wisdom of selling hand grenades in supermarkets, our microbiologist disagrees. He thinks the consumer has the most responsibility, but just refuses to accept it. Right? It's like a car company saying, yeah, we installed faulty brakes, but it's your fault for not putting your kid in a seatbelt, right? This is what the head of the CDC's food poisoning division had to say about this blame the victim attitude from the meat industry. Is it reasonable that if a consumer undercooks a hamburger, their 3-year-old dies? Is that reasonable? Not to worry, the meat industry's on it. They just got FDA approval for a bacteria-eating virus to spray on the meat. These so-called bacteriophages attack the bacteria, the salmonella, etc., that cause the disease. Now, there certainly have been concerns expressed about the ability of these bacteria-eating viruses to spread toxin genes between bacteria, especially given the difficulties of preventing large numbers of these viruses from being released in the environment from the slaughter plants. It could also allow the meat industry to become even more complacent about food safety, kind of like the quick fix, techno fix argument about irradiation. Who cares how much fecal matter is in the meat, right, if you can just blast it with enough radiation to effectively sterilize it in the end. Now, the industry is concerned about consumer acceptance of these bacteria-eating viruses. It may present somewhat of a challenge. So, of course, they're not going to label it or anything. But if you think that's going to be a challenge, check out their other bright idea. The effect of extracted housefly pupae on pork preservation, sciencey way of saying they want to smear a maggot mixture on the meat. It's a low cost. Think about it. Look. Maggots live off of rotting flesh, yet at the same time, however, there's no reports of maggots having any serious diseases. So, hey, they must be filled with some kind of antibacteria, something, right? So let's take some maggots, wash them off, towel them off, a little Vitamix action, and voila! Safer meat. We talked about kidney failure. What about liver failure? We have known for decades that one can treat liver failure with a plant-based diet and decrease the amount of toxins that would build up in the blood without a fully functional liver to detoxify one's blood eating meat. I do have to admit, though, there is one group of people eating plant-based diets with worsening liver function. They're called alcoholics. You're living off of corn and potatoes and grapes, still not doing, strictly plant-based, but not doing good. It's not clear what to... Next on the list, essential hypertension. Essentially only found in people who eat meat. Again, we've known about this forever. This is 74 out of Hopkins. That the consumption of food of animal origin highly significantly associated with blood pressure. This is after weight has been accounted for. Again, even at the same weight, just a fraction of the risk. This is the latest. So when we kind of fast forward, 39 years later. So this, again, out of the Adventist II study again. Here's the hypertension. So, again, compared to meat eaters, and these are Adventist meat eaters. These are healthy. They don't eat a lot of meat, significantly less meat than regular people. And they're healthy. You know, they don't smoke. They have these other kind of healthy lifestyle behaviors. All right. So compared to healthy meat eaters, if you go on kind of what they call a semi-vegetarian diet, again, just kind of weekly as opposed to daily meat eating, cut your risk of this leading killer, high blood pressure, 23%. And that's why people die of strokes, right? They have the high blood pressure. All right, 23%. Now, look, you cut out all meat except fish, you just drop your risk 38%. Cut out all meat, period, you just cut your risk more than half. Though, to fully exploit the power of diet, one really has to move towards a fully plant-based diet. But check it out. You see the same thing. Look at diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Again, a stepwise progression. The more and more plant-based one's diet gets. And as we saw before, BMI, over 25 is overweight. The only group that's ideal weight were the vegans. But what this shows, look, it's not all black and white. I don't want people going away thinking, oh, well, I got to, no. Anything we can do to move our diet in a healthy direction can significantly, look at this, cut in half, just significantly improve and so look, it can be a process. We can improve our diets as we go along, but any step in that direction, you can get an almost immediate benefit in terms of chronic disease risk. How long does it take to lower one's blood pressure on a healthy diet? 12 days, actually 11 days. See, this is McDougall. Dr. McDougall out Santa Rosa, California, took 500 meat eaters, put them on a plant-based diet, got about a 6% drop in blood pressure within 11 days. And that was people who came in with normal blood pressure who didn't even need it. Those who came in with high blood pressure got about twice the benefit. And again, less than even 2 weeks. Killer number 14 is Parkinson's disease. What can a plant-based diet do for Parkinson's disease? Well, we know that every single study, prospective study ever done on looking at dairy or milk consumption and Parkinson's found an increased risk of Parkinson's disease. You say, why? Well, one possibility is that dairy products, we know that dairy products in the United States are contaminated with neurotoxic chemicals. We have substantial evidence suggesting exposure to the pesticides and pollutants increase Parkinson's disease risk. We have autopsy studies finding higher levels of these pollutants in the brains of Parkinson's patients than compared to people who didn't die of Parkinson's. And some of those compounds are present at low levels in dairy products. They're talking about compounds like tetrahydroisoquinoline, which is Parkinsonism-related compound found predominantly in cheese, actually. But even the levels in cheese are not very high. The concern is that these neurotoxins may accumulate in the brain over long periods of consumption. And any of those who've been following my website, last year I also did a video on treating Parkinson's, successfully treating Parkinson's with a plant-based diet as well. Very exciting. And finally, 15. It's pneumonitis, aspiration pneumonia caused by difficulty swallowing, secondary to a stroke, or Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all things we've already covered. So here we go. Here's our top 15 killers. Right? And a plant-based diet can help prevent nearly all of them, can be used to treat more than half of them, and may even reverse the course of disease in some of them, including, in many cases, our top 3 killers. Anyone want to solve the healthcare crisis? I have a suggestion. Now, look, you can take drugs too, right? Cholesterol-lowering drugs for heart disease, sugar pills or insulin injection for diabetes. Usually takes a couple types of blood pressure pills to bring your blood pressure under control. But that's the beauty of diet. It's not like there's one diet if you want to protect your liver. Oh, and then you got to go on the different kidney diet if you want to protect your kidneys. Oh, but if you care about your heart, family history, okay. No, one diet to rule them all, right? And what about side effects, right, of the drugs? I'm not talking a little rash. Side effects kill. An estimated 106,000 Americans every year, deaths from adverse drug reactions. Not overdose, not illicit drugs. These are drugs prescribed by doctors, wiping out over 100,000 people, taken as directors, wiping out over 100,000 people every year in the United States. Say, wait a second, 106,000 deaths? Well, that means that the sixth leading cause of death is doctors. The sixth leading killer in the United States is me. Thankfully, I can be prevented with a plant-based diet. Indeed, no, if you actually look at studies, this is from the original Adventist study, those compared to vegetarians, those eating vegetarian, meat eaters twice as likely to be on aspirin, sleeping pills, tranquilizers, antacids, painkillers, blood pressures, medications, laxatives, of course, as well as insulin, right? So a plant-based diet is good for people that don't like taking drugs, don't like paying for drugs, and don't like risking drug side effects. Although, plant-based diets have side effects of their own. Side effects include fewer chronic diseases, fewer allergies, fewer surgeries, fewer drugs, fewer hospitalizations. And so this is the surgery stuff. I just talked about the big killers here, but fewer, varicose veins and hemorrhoids and gallbladder disease, fewer hysterectomies even. And then in terms of other diseases that I didn't mention, less rheumatoid arthritis, and more importantly, fewer diseases overall. That's what you get. Eating healthy, fewer diseases overall. This is the latest side effect of plant-based eating. We'll do allergies just for a moment. This is just fascinating. The concern, when I read that adding a few servings of fruits and vegetables can so boost your immune system, I was like, well, wait a second. What about the millions of Americans suffering from autoimmune diseases or seasonal allergies? Their immune system is a little bit too boosted. Might eating healthy make things even worse by tipping them even farther? So that's why I was so excited to see this news. It turns out that no, in fact, compared to vegetarian women, non-vegetarians have 30% more chemical allergies, 24% more asthma, more drug allergies, more bee sting allergies, more hay fevers. So by eating healthy, we get the best of both worlds, right? We support our disease-fighting sectors of our immune system, but we downregulate these overarching autoimmune and inflammatory reactions, and so we just get that kind of sweet spot in the middle by eating healthy. Here's the latest side effect of plant-based eating: fewer cataracts. That's what we get. In fact, you can tell there's a study done in Europe because what they call the heavy meat eating group, the heavy meat eaters, 1 serving a day. Those are the heavy, all right, but compared to the heavy meat eating group, those that cut their meat consumption in half may drop their risk of cataracts. The leading cause of vision loss in this country, 15%. Cut out all meat except fish, just dropped 21%. Cut out all meat, period, just dropped 30%. Again, you can continue to get more and more benefit the more and more plant-based one's diet gets. At the same time, every little bit helps, right? And so I don't want people leaving here. Even just cutting down on meat consumption can significantly lower our risk. Our bodies want to be healthy. They want to heal themselves. And so if you just kick them a little less hard 3 times a day, your body can heal just that much better. All right, so imagine if our nation embraced a plant-based diet, even just cutting down on meat. Imagine what that could do. Well, let me leave you with a case study of where a country that actually gave it a try. Finland, of all places. Finland, after World War II, started packing on the meat, eggs, and dairy. And by the 1970s, Finnish men had the highest levels of heart disease mortality in the world, bumping us down to number 2. Well, they didn't want to die, so they got serious. All right, well, we know heart disease caused by high cholesterol caused by saturated fat intake. So the main focus of this nationwide strategy, let's just reduce the high saturated fat intake. Where's saturated fat found? We're here in the U.S. It's cheese, chicken, and cake, basically, or donuts, right? Cheese, chicken, and dessert. So what did they do? All right, well, a berry project was launched to get farmers to switch from dairy farming to berry farming, all right? And indeed, many farmers did switch from dairies to berries. They instituted these kind of friendly cholesterol-lowering competitions between villages to see like whose village can get the lower average cholesterol, and then they give out prizes. All right, okay. So how'd they do? Well, look, even if there was just a tiny benefit, on a population scale, I mean, that could save thousands of lives, right? But instead, remarkably great changes took place. What am I talking about? I am talking about an 80% drop in cardiac mortality across the entire country. 80% of the heart disease gone. And with so much less cancer, so much less heart disease, they cut total mortality, extended life by years for both men and women. And look, Finland is no country of vegans, right? It just shows the power of even cutting back on some of these deleterious foods. And now, of course, who's fighting to be scrabbled back on top to be number one? All right. So why doesn't our government make those same recommendations? Well, I have a series of videos talking about the conflicts of interest within the dietary guidelines committees. People actually write the official dietary guidelines, and whether they're funded by candy bar companies or the Sugar Association, or whether they happen to be a member of McDonald's Advisory Council on Healthy Lifestyles, or what about maybe they serve on Coca-Cola's Beverage Institute for Health and Wellness. This is my favorite, Joanna Dwyer up at Tufts with me. She was the original Duncan Hines brand girl before she was the official Crisco brand girl, before she went on to write the dietary guidelines for all Americans. If you read what this committee actually comes up with, you'll see that there is no discussion at all of the scientific research on the health consequences of eating meat. Everything I've talked about for the last hour, don't even mention it. Why? Because if the committee actually discussed this research, it'd be unable to justify its recommendation to eat meat at all, as research would show that meat increases the risk of chronic diseases, contrary to the whole point of having dietary guidelines. So thus, by simply ignoring the research, the committee is able to reach a conclusion that would otherwise look improper. Right? They can't even talk about the science. What do we know? We know plant-based diet, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, no meat, reverse heart disease, can prevent deaths from heart disease, may slow the progression of cancer. But again, they can't even talk about the science. And in fact, the 2015 guidelines are coming out soon. And on Tuesday, I'm actually presenting before the committee. It'll be very interesting. So there's me and like the Salt Institute, and then the Sugar Association, and the Pork Producers Council. It is a political education. It's free, open to the public, down in Washington, D.C. at NIH. I don't know, check it out. Tuesday, it'll be fun. They record them. I don't know if they're available online, but it'd be neat to, I don't know, see me wrestle with the pork producers. All right, so the best summary and conclusion of U.S. dietary policy that I've ever been able to find was actually summarized in this cartoon that said, look, the new dietary guidelines have been released. They're talking about the 2010. They tell us to eat healthier, but not so healthy as to noticeably affect any corporate profits. Thank you very much. If you'd like to share what I talked about today, this is actually taken from 2 DVDs. So this is actually kind of like a 2-hour talk, kind of squished down to about 50 minutes because I want to take a lot of time for questions. But they're both available outside for $10. All proceeds from all the sales of my DVDs, books, speaking engagements, all goes to charity. of course, and I also have copies of my, if you want to go way more in depth and not just cover the main points, I have a series of 16 volumes of clinical nutrition, and 17 comes out in 2 weeks, and if you signed up on that clipboard, I'll send you an email when the new DVD is out. And if you didn't sign up on this clipboard that should have been circulating around, whoever has it, you can take it back to the table. And when I'm signing, you can sign up as well. And of course, all my work is available free online at nutritionfacts.org.